Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Good morning, everyone. Okay, hopefully I got rid of that nasty echo that was going on. I didn't realize it was going to play back in me here. Let me just see if I can fix that. And I would like to say welcome to everybody from Dallas, Texas. If you hear some noise in the background, you may be hearing thunder. And you may be hearing rain. We are under a severe thunderstorm warning here in Dallas County. So hopefully that doesn't take down the stream or take down the internet connection. I'm monitoring both. A few housekeeping things first. There is a considerable delay after I speak and when you send comments before I see them. I do welcome comments as we go along, and I will answer them as soon as I can. Meanwhile, I'm being distracted by... Oh, where'd he go? So, getting down to business. Today we're going to talk about Panadapters. It is a very popular subject. It's one I get asked about very often, and I'm going to try and answer some of your questions. And unfortunately, to get started, I'm going to inflict on you a PowerPoint presentation and try and get through a few slides. When someone says to me, tell me how to set up a Panadapter for my rig, this is like asking how long is a piece of string. It very much depends on where you got the piece of string from and what you're trying to accomplish with that piece of string. And in the case of Panadapters, there are so many different types of rigs out there. Plus, combine that with the fact that as users, we all have different frequency ranges that we're interested in monitoring. So you really need a pretty good idea up front what you're trying to accomplish. And so I want to kind of go through that first, and let me pull up the PowerPoint presentation and stop. Okay, I'm hearing that you still are getting echoes. Not sure why that should be. Let me just check a couple of things here real quick. Okay, I've cancelled one. Again, I apologize. This is something else I wanted to mention to you. This is actually the first time I've done this, and it's all new software for me. Okay, some of you are doing okay. That's good, so I'm going to carry on. So next up, let me get into the PowerPoints and try and set some background, and then I promise we'll go live and we'll actually play with the real radio shortly, okay? So, without further ado, if I can figure out how to drive this, let's go here. And this is the agenda for what I intend to go through today. And one thing I'd like to point out is Panadapters are great fun, and they're actually quite easy to set up once you've figured out what you're going to do. So, in a sense, it's going to take you longer to do the planning than it will to actually implement a Panadapter. And the first and most important thing that needs to be considered is how are you going to do the RF signal routing. And basically what that means is you are trying to share a signal from your antenna between both your rig, which you're going to use for reception and transmission, and the RSP, which is what's going to give you greater visibility into the signals of interest. The next up PC connections are fairly trivial, but I'll go through that as well for completeness. Then what do you need to have in terms of software to control and synchronize the rig? And then the last bullet, I looked at it just now, it says use cases, and I assumed that by using a case it would be not as ugly as carrying things around in a plastic bag, but actually it means use cases, and I'm going to show you some of the things we can do with a Panadapter. And assuming all goes well and we have time, I'm going to also show you how to set up, can you hear that thunder? Set up Ham Radio Deluxe and use that in conjunction with your Panadapter and SDR Uno. And maybe talk a little bit about using second antennas or second tuners as well. So without further ado, let's look at how we can set up our RF signals. And first up, let's consider the RF spectrum at large. And you may not be able to see this whole thing, but basically it goes from 3 Hertz all the way up to 3 gigahertz. And as you probably know, your RSP will cover the range 1 kilohertz to 2 gigahertz. And many of us are primarily interested in the HF band, and you can see that's a fairly small subset of the range that the RSP is capable of covering. And then within that, of course, we have the various sub-bands that are allocated for different purposes. So the important thing to notice here is, the amount of spectrum that you can see on the RSP very much depends on how you're getting an RF signal to the RSP in addition to the antenna, and that will determine the capabilities of the completed system. Now, this may not make too much sense to you right now if you haven't already set up a Panadapter, but hopefully when we see the examples of it working, it will become clearer. So let's move on to the next slide, and here is an ultra simplified block diagram of your rig. And at the bottom half, when you transmit, you talk into a microphone, it gets amplified and goes to an RF modulator, which goes out to your antenna. On the receive side, there are many options available for how you receive the signal. And there are many different ways. First up is a wide bandwidth RX out terminal. That's available on some rigs. Another option on some rigs is they have what I would call an RX out to RX in loop through. This is typically used for implementing external filters, but it can also be used as a tap point to take RX out and feed that to your RSP. On a lot of rigs that have that, though, be aware that once you select that RX out terminal, it normally breaks the regular reception path on your rig. So you do need to loop that signal back into RX in so that you have the rest of the receive side of your rig active. Going through preamps and pre-filters, some rigs have a pre-selected RX out, which is fairly broadband. It's before the various IF stages have narrowed down the bandwidth, but normally there will be some pre-select filters in front of that signal, which will ultimately determine how much frequency range you can see on your RSP. And then finally we get to IF out, and IF out is after the IF stages, and after you've gone through the IF mixers and filters, you will have a considerably constrained amount of spectrum that you can look at on your RSP. So in general, the further to the left you can go in this diagram, the more bandwidth you will have to look at on your RSP. And what are these capabilities are available on varies widely from rig to rig, and that in turn may implement or may dictate to you how you want to hook up your own Panadapter. Okay, my colleague tells me that all the echoes have gone at his end as well, which is really good. So let's look at some examples here. Wide bandwidth output. This is actually the back of a TS-590SG. I can put a pointer on here, I forgot about that. The so-called DRV output on the back of a TS-590SG. I believe the TS-890 also has such an output, but the TS-990 does not. This is a wideband output that can be configured to be an output. The 590S does not have that ability. Next up, a loop through. This is actually an icon, and you can see, I'm sorry it's not a very clear picture, this says RX antenna, and there's an in terminal and an out terminal, and what you would want to do would be to loop through from RX out to RX in conjunction with a splitter, so that the signal that gets looped back runs through the receive side of the rig, and the other side of the splitter goes off to your RSP. Next we come to the pre-selected RX out. This is actually a Yaesu, I forget which particular model. In fact, this has both IF out options and also RX out. Now RX out in this case is after the pre-select filters, so there is a constraint on how much bandwidth you can get, and off the top of my head I can't remember the feature that they call it on the Yaesu, but it's a way of limiting the amount of signal that goes into the radio to avoid interference from signals outside the desired band. Now, one thing that all these features have, all these rigs that have built-in outputs, and you'll see I put this on every bullet here, the internal TR, that's transmit receive switch, protects the RSP. And you see that on every one of these, and the reason that's important is because if you're sharing the same antenna between the RSP, which is a very sensitive receiver, and the power output from your rig, which may be up to 100 watts or more, you want to make absolutely sure that when you transmit that 100 watts doesn't find its way to the input of the RSP. If you don't, the consequences are dire. If you've seen me live giving my presentations at the various ham shows, back in the day when we used to have ham shows, this is a case of where the smoke gets out. And coming in the upper left, you see the antenna cable on an RSP, and down here at the bottom in the circle, you see the fried remains of what used to be the input stage and the protection circuitry of the RSP. And that needs to be avoided at all costs. So let's move on and talk about what if your rig doesn't have any of those outputs available. Well, there is an alternative, and it's what I call the universal solution or universal configuration. In this case, we use an external TR switch, and shown here is the MFJ 1708B-SDR. There is a similar device available from DX Engineering called the RTR2. I should mention in passing, my thanks go to MFJ. When people started using their RSPs for Panadapters, they were using and modifying the original 1708 TR switch to make it work better to allow reception on both the rig and the RSP at the same time. And MFJ very kindly worked in conjunction with SDRplay to implement some circuitry changes to allow them to be used out of the box, which is really good. So what happens in this arrangement is your antenna goes into the TR switch and goes out to your rig, and when you're in receive mode, it also goes out to your RSP. On the other hand, when you transmit on the rig, the internal relays inside the switch isolate the RSP and ground its input and send the entire signal from your rig through the switch and off to the antenna, thus protecting the device. Now, I should also stress that it's very important to implement this control terminal on the switch. And what that does is that enables you to switch the relays in the TR switch every time you key up the transmitter. Now, as you see written on the box, it says it has RF sensing, and it does seem to work. I've used it. But my attitude is you have some expensive equipment there, and you want to take as much precautions as possible to ensure that equipment is protected. So we strongly recommend you bring a control line out from your rig, and quite often on Yaesus it's labeled as TX ground, and it's actually the lower terminal here, which can connect directly to the control terminal here. On ICOMs they often call this terminal send, and on Kenwoods it's normally stuck in one of the accessory connectors on the back, and I believe the signal name is normally RL control. And the key thing here is to ensure that this control signal connects to ground during transmit. And if you do this, you will have maximum protection for all your equipment. And if for some reason you lose this control line, then you still have the added insurance of the RF sense within the switch to protect you. Now there is another alternative. Basically, so far we've talked about rigs that have built-in outputs that you can use, and here we've just shown using an external TR switch to get you to the same point. Now, if you're not averse to doing a little bit of modification to your rig, there is an alternative, or several alternatives actually. The first thing are the so-called PAT, or panoramic adapter tap boards, which were originally designed by the late Dave G4 HUP, and they are now available from SDR kits, and also from Dave at KD2C. If you're listening to my colleague Mike's Zoom session yesterday, Dave was on there talking about some of his products, and there are a vast number of boards there which have been developed to work in conjunction with many different rigs, and they have varying degrees of bandwidth coming out. And I know I got my my wrist slapped, but by some people on the Facebook groups, because I said, well, if you use a tap board, you're going to have limited bandwidth, and that is true if you come out after the IF mixer. Okay, if you move it further forward to the secondary RX tap in your rig, then obviously you can get further bandwidth. And I also want to mention at this point, in the lower right, there's a little add-on adapter that you can get specifically for the ICOM 7300. This is a purely passive arrangement, and basically inserts itself in series with the RF path within the rig, and gives you an RX out to RX in loop through. In addition to that, there is another board, albeit more expensively, also for the 7300, that has a built-in buffer and amplifiers. So that might be something else worth considering. And I see a comment came in about this is for HF only. I have very much confined what I'm doing here to HF. If you have a UHF rig, I assume that it will have some outputs that you can use for sharing the antenna. If not, you will have to take your own steps to come up with some sort of external TR switch to protect the RSP. The alternative would be to, someone mentioned a Dow key. That's certainly another way of doing it as well. Essentially, you're building your own external TR switch when you're doing that. I've tended to try and concentrate on the readily available off-the-shelf solutions that are out there. If you're handy with a soldering iron, then certainly you can investigate these adapter boards, or building your own solution that works in your own particular configuration. So that's kind of the RF side of things done. Let's have a quick look at connecting to the PC. And if I could ever find my mouse, here we go. Not a lot involved here. Again, most modern rigs will have a USB port that you can connect directly from the rig to your PC. Some of the older ones have a DB9 RS-232 type connector, which can be used in conjunction with a converter box or a converter cable. Sometimes these are available from the rig's manufacturer. Other times they're available from the usual ham radio sources, and that allows you to go from the RS-232 port to your PC. Some rigs, like the, I think this is a Yaesu again shown here, have both options, and that's sometimes useful if you want to do two separate things with the two outputs. You may be using one cat control port for building a Panadapter, and you may be using the other one for doing some stuff with like TTY signals and so on and so forth. In addition to the hardware connection, you do need the appropriate drivers. And the good news is, if you have already been using some sort of computer software with your rig, then you've probably got those drivers already installed. If not, the manufacturer of your rig often has the drivers available for download. If you're using an RS-232 to USB interface, they will often either provide drivers with the product or link to download them. And finally, and this worked for me on the Kenwood, Windows itself found an appropriate driver for the interface once it was plugged in, which is all well and good. So hopefully at this point you've got some idea what you want to do as far as hooking up your rig. And to some extent you're limited by what you have there on the rig, and then the other thing that will constrain how you do this is what you want to get out of your Panadapter. So let's see if we can get a bit closer to some real live hardware now. And originally I considered holding a camera and pointing at the back of the rig I've got here, but I figured it would be easier if I just took a nice picture you can look at. So here we see the, or at least I thought we could. Let's go. I'm sorry, we lost the slide there. Let me try and bring that up one more time. I knew I was going to make a mistake or two as we went through this. Let's try this again. And let's move this down and go back here. Okay, so here's the back of the rig. It's a TS-590SG, and I'll try and highlight a few pointers as we go through here. The antenna is hooked up. This is connected to, in fact, an MFJ receive-only loop antenna. That in turn is fed from the rig through the DRV output, you can see here, and that goes to an RSP1A, which you can see in the little shot is something I just bolted to the side of the rig. If you've been by the Kenwood or the HRO booth at some of the ham shows during the past year or so, you may have been able to see that. And so that is the RF signal path I was talking about, in from the antenna, out from the rig and into the RSP. In addition to that, we need some USB connections. So USB out, which comes from the front of the RSP1A there, is this black cable here that goes off to the my laptop. And then secondly, the USB port on the back of the rig itself also goes off to the laptop. So it's fairly straightforward to hook all this stuff up. And at this point, I would like to give a big shout out to Phil over at Kenwood for loaning me this 590SG and allowing me to haul it around the country and demonstrate how to make a Panadapter. So that's the hardware hookup. Now let's see what we have to do to actually set up the rig itself. And here we go. So here's my camera pointing at the front of the rig. I've done the best I can to minimize glare and enable you to see the display on the front of the rig. There are a few menu items, and what I'm going to show here will be obviously specific to this particular rig, but some of the similar steps are going to be needed on whatever rig you're using. So let's go into the menus of the rig here and see what we can come up with. So I click the menu button down here, and the first one I need is menu 67. Oh, I'm pressing the wrong button. Here we go. Menu 67. And most rigs will have something analogous to this. Obviously the number will probably change. Menu 67 on this is for the COM port baud rate. Now that, when they say COM port, they mean the serial RS-232 port, which is not the one we're using, so we don't need to worry about that. But if we go to the next menu, this is for the USB port. And again, this typically is not a critical parameter. The main thing here is that we match the baud rate that's set here on the rig with the one we use in the other software we're running on the PC. And I have it set to 57.6, which has been working well for me in many different applications. So we've got the baud rate set up. The other thing we need to do is menu 85 on here, and that is to specify that the DRV connector on the back of the rig is used as an antenna output. Normally that output would be used as a drive output to connect to a linear, and we don't want that. We want it used as an antenna output. So that's all we need there. I believe there may be one additional menu, I think it was 69, that I just want to mention in passing because it has caught some people out. This is specifying a data connection for data communications from a PC to the rig. And basically, since we're using USB for our Panadapter, we want to make sure that we're not going to confuse the rig by having it think this is some sort of data input for data that it wants to transmit. So we're on accessory 2 here, which is good because it means it's not on USB. And that's basically all we need as far as setting up the rig's concerned. And you'll probably see something similar whether you're using a Yaesu or an ICOM, and the data rate and enabling the USB port is the main thing that you need to take care of there. So we can come back out of that, and what do we need to do next? Well, there's some software on the PC we need to worry about. So let's have a look and see what we've got going there. And you're going to need some sort of SDR software. And I am going to look today specifically at SDR Uno because it's our own software which has been developed specifically to use with the RSP family. But it's very similar if you want to use Simon Brown's SDR console or HD SDR or even Cubic SDR, which of those programs listed, Cubic is the only one that's multi-platform. So that's quite a popular option if you're using Linux or Mac OS. And then there is some RigSync specific software you need, and because we're on Windows here, I'm going to be talking about OmniRig, which is an incredibly useful piece of software. On the other platforms, they use something called HamLib, and that's built into Cubic SDR. So if you're running on a Mac, that is how it will be implemented. But again, the basic principle is pretty much the same for all of them. So, having done that, let's see what comes up next. Let's go to... Okay, here's a fairly close-up view of the screen showing SDR Uno running. And the first thing we want to do is bring up OmniRig. Let me see if I can find OmniRig. And here we go. Here's OmniRig. Now, what OmniRig lets you do is set up controls for up to 2 rigs. We only have 1 rig here, so that's all we're going to worry about. And it's fairly simple to set up. There's a drop down here with many, many different types of rigs. So we select the TS-590, which is what we're running here. The other thing the only other thing you're likely to need to change is the COM port. And COM4 we've selected. Now it says COM5. We need COM4. Whoops. I'm having a hard time getting my mouse behaving itself here. Let's try this one more time. Let's go back to COM4. And to know which COM port we need to use, we need to look in Device Manager. And hopefully I've got Device Manager here I can bring up. And within Device Manager, we just need to look at the section for ports, COM and LPT. And you will see down here, Silicon Labs USB to UART bridge COM4. That is the port that shows up when I plug in the Kenwood to my laptop. So COM4 is the value we need to put over here in OmniRig. And then finally the baud rate, again that matches the baud rate we looked at in the menus on the rig. I had it set to 57.6, so I'm going to set it to 57.6 here, and that's all we need to do. So having done that, let's get Device Manager out of the way. And let's get OmniRig out of the way. And now let's see what we need to do in Uno. Well, the first thing we can do is go to Settings in the main window. And we go to the ORig tab. There are many tabs available in Settings. Initially, ORig is hidden, so you'll need to step across until you get to ORig. We see the TS-590 shown. We see that it is online. And right now it says it's not used. Now, the key thing here is that the 590 is online and we're connected to the OmniRig server. And what that's telling us is that everything is good. So with that in mind, we can now go and look at the settings in RX Control. Now in the settings for RX Control, once again we go to the ORig tab, not the CAT tab. We go to the ORig tab, And we have a choice of whether we want to control rig 1 or rig 2. Remember, we had 2 rigs we could set up in OmniRig. So we want to use rig 1. And if we now press the rig sync button at the top here, you will see that it says we're used by instance 0 VRX0. And that's what this is, instance 0 VRX0. So we're good to go. I'll turn that off again temporarily. And that completes the setup for SDR Uno. So now we should be ready to play. So let's see if we can play. And here's a window showing a bit more of the various windows we got set up for SDR Uno. Let's hit play and see if we have any signals going today. Well, this is completely dead, isn't it? And not exactly sure what's going on here. Oh, then we've got a waterfall. Maybe I'm not sure what exactly is going on. Let's change bands, see if anything interesting happens. I got a little bit of stuff going off on the bottom of the screen. I hope I didn't get zapped by lightning when that thunderstorm came through. I'm looking pretty dead right down there at the moment. I'm going to just stop that. I'm actually going to stop the program and restart it just in case something strange happened. You got to love it when you go live. Nothing works like it should, right? Okay, let's get SDR Uno running again. While that's starting up, I'm just going to run around and check some connections here real quick. And I'm back. And interestingly enough, I left out one step just now when we were setting up the rig. And this is something, again, that's only specific to the Kenwood 590SG. And I deliberately turned off a feature because I wanted to remind you or show you how to get it turned on. So once we set it up for the DRV output to be an antenna out, there is one more step that's required, and there is a button on the front of the rig here called DRV, and we need to hold that button for a second or two, and a little asterisk will appear in the screen to show that we've now set the rig to output via that DRV pin. So now, if we're lucky, we may find that we get some signals if we start up SDR Uno. And what a relief that is. So I'm going to unmute it and see if we can hear anything real quick. I think I turned the volume down on just about everything around here so that when I was worried earlier about the sound, oh, here we go. This is going to be loud. Yeah, when we had the echo before, I turned off just about all the audio I could find. I was turning it off. Okay, so as you can see, we now have some signals. We're on the 20 meter band, and let me see if I can pull up a camera shot. And I tried to zoom in on the rig, and you can see the front panel of the rig there. So now let me go back to SDR Uno and find the rig sync button at the top here. And we click that, and what do you know? Down here on the display, the Kenwood has changed to 14307. I'm going to mute the signal so you can hear me. And you'll notice that not only has the rig synced with SDR Uno, when we're on 20 meters, we are on upper sideband, obviously, and you will see the mode has changed on the rig to upper sideband also. So now, if, for example, we go to 40 meters, and there's a little bit of activity going on, but now we've switched to lower sideband in SDR Uno, and again you will see the mode has changed to lower sideband on the rig also. And that kind of behavior is again determined by the settings window in for the RX. We have 4 choices. I'm sorry, this may be kind of small for you to see. The first one says sync VRX to the rig, and we know that happens because if we click around on the spectrum and tune to 7.196, in this case the rig will follow us. The second option is to sync the rig to the VRX, and what that means is I can turn the tuning dial on the rig, and as the frequency changes on the rig, SDR Uno remains in sync. And then finally, sync RX mode, and what that does for us is that means that when we switch from lower sideband to upper sideband, for example, that mode change in SDR Uno will be reflected on the rig itself, which makes it very easy to use. Now at this point, you know, we are listening to audio through the PC, but we also have the option of turning up the AF gain on the rig itself, and I don't know if you can hear that, but so we have a choice of going either way. And the normal way of operating this would be, while you're searching for a signal, would be to use the PC audio. And let's go back to something a little bit more active. So normally you would listen through the PC, and when you find a station and you want to work that station, then mute the PC and turn up the audio on the rig itself. The reason being, there is a delay due to signal processing from the signal that comes out of the rig through the RSP and through SDR Uno and so forth. So you will minimize that delay if you're actually wanting to talk to someone on the radio by using the receive side of the radio for listening, and then only using the audio through the PC when you're trying to find new signals. Okay. Again, I already showed you here that we can change the bands using the band select buttons in SDR Uno. It changes them on the rig. I like using the band select buttons. I know my colleague Mike is on here as well, and he never uses them. But for me, it makes it easy because what it does is it frames the visible spectrum to exactly the constraints of that band. Now you can zoom in if you want and look at it in more detail, but it does prevent me getting distracted by out-of-band signals. So this is a nice way to move around and see what's going on. One thing you can do is, we're now on 20 meters, both in SDR Uno and on the rig. I can go up and I can turn off this rig sync button. And now, while I'm still potentially talking to somebody on 14.175 megahertz, I can go into Uno and I can see what's going on 60 meters or 40 meters or 30 meters, and I'm not seeing much. Well, there's a little bit of activity there. So I can go around and I can keep an eye on all the other bands and leave the rig on the one band it was working. In fact, I don't even need to constrain myself to the frequency ranges from the band select buttons. I could turn off the LO lock. I could go from LIF to 0 IF mode, and I could pick a sample rate up to the full 10 megahertz that the RSP is capable of tuning. Okay, so at this point I'm looking 6 megahertz up to 16. So I can keep an eye on multiple bands at the same time, and then as and when I see a band I want to concentrate on, I can zoom in effectively on that using a band select button. Hopefully that makes some sense. Another thing I'd want to point out, this often catches people out, is I am on 40 meters here, and I'm still on 20 meters on the rig. So let me turn rig sync back on. And now we're both on 40 meters. I can go to 20 meters. And we're both on 20 meters. And as long as I change the bands in SDR Uno, everything's cool. But as you may know, your rig also has band select buttons on it. And I wish I knew a quick way to, let's see if I can show you this. If I go back, I can actually change bands on the rig itself by pressing these buttons. So for okay, we should be back. Okay, hopefully we're back with me. I got a notice there that we lost the connection for a while, but I think we should be back in. So to recap, we just changed the band on the rig, and we noticed that SDR Uno did not change bands. And the reason being, we used the band select button in SDR Uno, and to keep us within that band and not tuning outside, the LO lock function had been engaged. So if we did want to change the bands using the buttons on the front of the rig, we would first have to disengage LO lock by clicking on it, and then I can press a button on the rig, let's say 3.5 megahertz, and now we're back in sync again. So that is why sometimes people will say, wait, I changed the band on the rig, but SDR Uno didn't follow. And the reason for that is SDR Uno likes to set LO lock when you use the band select button. Hopefully that's reasonably clear. So another way, we talked about using up to 10 megahertz of spectrum to look at, and I'm sure a lot of you are using multiple monitors in your systems. And another way to do it is with a bit of finesse. You can actually open up multiple VRXs. So you could have a separate virtual receiver for each of the bands, as long as all the bands you're looking at are within that 10 megahertz window. I really don't have enough screen real estate to set that up here, but I did do an app note on the subject which is available from our video catalog online. So there's a lot of flexibility here in what you can do. So I'm going to turn off rig sync again, and I'm going to kind of get back to something we talked about when we were choosing how to make our RF connections. And that is, how much signal can you tune? So, for example, in SDR Uno, the TS-590 is an HF rig, basically, okay? So, if I want to go to, let's say 2 meters or 70 centimeters, we can see that there's still some activity. So 146 megahertz is well outside the range of the rig. But because I have that broad bandwidth output from the back, I'm able to go look at some other bands as well. I don't know if there's anything else we can look at. I'll tell you something that's kind of interesting for some people, maybe at least. Let's see, what have I got here? I'll get there eventually, I'm sure. I was playing the other day, let's see, memory controller, there was, I'm not sure we're going to see a whole lot of activity here, but up in UHF, 463 megahertz, this is used by a lot of the local police forces around here, and you'll see, I'm getting some coverage all the way up into UHF. Now, there will eventually come a point where I'm constrained on how much frequency I can look at out of the rig. I don't think I'm going to be much good up at 2 gigahertz. The other factor is I'm using an MFJ receive-only loop, and I'm not sure what the specs are on that, but it's not particularly high-frequency antenna either. So it's quite possible to go up and look at other bands. Because I have that broad bandwidth output, you will get a fair amount of range if you use an external TR switch. As was pointed out in the comments here, the MFJ switch I showed does have a limitation on how high it can go, in which case you may want to roll your own or use a higher frequency splitter and some other means of protecting the RSP. There is no doubt that if you're using an IF tap on the rig, you will not be able to look at 468 megahertz at the same time. And at this point, it boils down to what you want to get out of your Panadapter. Okay, so with that in mind, some of you may have RSP2s or an RSP Duo or an RSP DX, and you're probably saying, well, can I use the second input on my RSP2 with a different antenna to cover the higher bands? And the answer is yes, you most certainly can. So you can select inputs. You can select one antenna input which is connected to your rig when you want to use it as a Panadapter, and you can use the other input when you want to use it for covering frequencies outside the range of your rig. In the case of the RSP Duo, of course, you can do both of those at the same time. But there is one little gotcha I want to make you aware of when you do that. And this is covered in this slide here, where what we're trying to show is two antennas. The primary antenna is connected, in this case, through an external TR switch to your rig. It may be connected directly to the rig if you have that option. And then the RSP output of that goes to, in this case, an RSP Duo. And then the second input on the RSP Duo goes to a secondary antenna. Now, if the antennas are far enough apart, then there may not be any issues using it out of the box that way. But you do need to be aware of near field coupling, such that even if you're transmitting, if you're transmitting 100 watts down on HF on the primary antenna, and you've got a discone or something close by, you can easily pick up a lot of RF through near field coupling. And of course, you don't want to blow up your RSP, in which case you need to take some precautions. You could either use a TR switch, as we used before, in this case without a rig connection, just as a way of switching out the RSP during transmit. And you can still use the control input on that switch connected to the rig to do that. Or you can use a more of a crowbar approach. I believe DX Engineering has something called an RG Receive Guard 5000, which does that. So there are multiple different ways you can protect your rig if you want to do a two antenna setup. And I hope at this point that I've kind of given you an idea of what you can do as far as setting things up as a Panadapter. One thing I didn't mention that I should have done is once you've got the thing set up, you have the ability, if you wish, you could take this main SP window and you can make it arbitrarily large. And you can drag this thing down to be the whole display, right? And I've actually dragged it beyond the window I'm showing you here. So potentially you could take a second monitor, hook it up to your PC or your laptop, stick it on top of your rig, and then just have a nice big RF spectrum and waterfall display like this, and then use it as a way to click to tune throughout the bands. I probably would have done better to have made this window a bit smaller until I'd gone back to an HF band. So let's try that real quick. We will go bands, ham lower. We'll go back to 40 meters. We'll go to 20 meters. I think we had a bit more activity going on there. So again, once you've got everything set up, there's no reason not to make this window arbitrarily large, unless you think you're going to want to get to some of the controls for one reason or another. And of course, even if you do it that way, you always have the option of clicking on the icon down in the taskbar and bringing up whatever particular window you want to show on the screen. Okay, hopefully that was reasonably clear. And greetings to Wes from North Carolina. I hope you're doing good out there. And I don't see any other questions coming in on the chat. So what I'd like to do now is go look at Ham Radio Deluxe. And this kind of dovetails nicely with some of the stuff Mike was talking about yesterday. And a lot of people use Ham Radio Deluxe for logging or for DM780, which is used for decoding digital signals. A lot of you may have used that, or you may have used WSJTX or FLDigi or any of those programs. Anytime you use a anytime you have a program that can be used to work in conjunction with a rig, then you're going to have to worry about what happens when you have one program trying to control the rig and also SDR Uno trying to control the rig by way of a Panadapter. So by way of example, let's look at Ham Radio Deluxe. And one of the first things you need to do when you run HRD, and the first thing I need to do is close SDR Uno at this point. Bear with me a second. Let me close that. And that should bring up HRD on the screen. Okay, so this is Ham Radio Deluxe. If you're not familiar with it, it is a suite of programs that enable you to do many different things. I'm going to hit connect. Now, normally, if I was using Ham Radio Deluxe with this particular rig, I would have it set up to control a Kenwood TS-590SG on COM4, not surprisingly. So I can click connect, and HRD will open up, and if I'm lucky, I can bring up a view of the front of the rig, and again we see everything is synchronized. Hopefully I can tune on the rig and it will tune HRD, and if I go into HRD I can probably do the same thing here by moving the digits. Everything stays in sync, and that's fine. So that would be the normal way you have it set up. But now the question is, what happens when you also want to use SDR Uno at the same time? Because SDR Uno is trying to control the rig also, and you want to avoid conflict between the two pieces of software. Now, there are several ways you can get around this. I follow the KISS principle myself, so I go for something that's fairly easy to implement, that I know works, is not too complicated, that way I can understand it. But there are other ways of doing it, and I'll try and mention that as we go along. So let me see if I can show you a little diagram here. Now hopefully you can see this slide here. So when you're using other third-party software with SDR Uno, and that could be a logger, digital decoder, like I mentioned before, FLDigi, multi-PSK, you name it. Instead of having the third-party software controlling the rig directly, that's the bottom part, the dashed line there, the way we're going to do that is we're going to set up a virtual COM port to talk to SDR Uno, specifically the RX control window, and then SDR Uno is going to talk to the rig through OmniRig to set the frequency. And that way there's no conflict, because you don't have two pieces of software trying to control the rig at the same time. Hopefully that makes some sense. Let's look at this in practice. So when we use this virtual COM port to control SDR Uno, as Mike was discussing yesterday, we use a virtual COM port, and we use it as if it was using CAT to control a rig. And SDR Uno, as far as the other software is concerned, looks just like a TS-480. So let's see if we can do that, and maybe on a good day, let's turn this off. Let's see if I can find COMOCOM is the one I use. Here it is right here. There are several different kinds of virtual COM port software out there. COMOCOM is very popular with me because it's simple. It only allows you to add pairs. It doesn't allow you to add splitters and things like that, which other software, VSPE, VSPD, and there's probably even others, have capabilities to do all sorts of wonderful things. As I said, I like to follow the KISS principle, so I just set up my virtual COM port pair of COM5 and COM6, and that was basically all I had to do. So now, if I want to use Ham Radio Deluxe, I can put COMOCOM away. I can go back to, let's get rid of that connection, Do you want to switch it off? No, thank you. And we'll go back to the connect window. So what we do is we create a second entry in here, which if I hadn't done it already, you would just select add. And what we do is we tell HRD we're talking to a TS-480 on COM5. And remember, COM5 was one of that COM5, COM6 virtual COM ports that we set up just now in Comocom. So we do that, and then we hit connect. And then things will go around. There may be some sort of error message, I'm not too sure. And what we do now is we need to go over to SDR Uno. And let me see if I can bring, let's minimize that temporarily, and open up SDR Uno. I found that it prefers it if you open SDR or open HRD first and then SDR Uno. If you try doing SDR Uno first and then HRD tends to complain about it. So that's why I closed down SDR Uno previously. And now, once we're back in SDR Uno, the only settings we need to look at now are for the RX control window. And here it is. Open up settings. What happened to my XD? Excuse me. Wrong settings. Here we go. Okay, so now we in the settings window for RX control, we tab across, and this time we do want to go to the CAT selection. Because remember, we're using CAT so that HRD controls SDR Uno. And then in the COM device, we need to select COM6, which is the other one of the virtual pair we set up. And we need to hit enable and connect. It says status connected. Let's hope that's true, and let's bring up Ham Radio Deluxe and see what Ham Radio Deluxe thinks. Actually, what I'm going to do is I am going to go to a different view that gives us a bit more space. Let's see. That will at least enable us to see HRD. I think I might even go bigger than that. Here we go. We've got a lot of real estate now, but we've got a lot of things we're trying to look at. So, okay, we got SDR Uno running. We've got HRD running. Let's see if we can bring the picture of the rig into play as well. And there's the rig. And the last thing we need to do is go back and turn on rig sync. And now hopefully everything is on 14.175. Now I guess I can play something here. So let's retune by clicking on the spectrum over here. You can probably hear some tones or something. Yeah, there we go. So 14.073 on SDR Uno. Ham Radio Deluxe also 14.073, and as you can see, the rig is displaying the same thing. I can tune on the rig, and it will all settle down. 14.08181, again shown in both pieces of software and the rig, and of course I can tune within HRD as well, and everything stays in sync. There's no conflict. All HRD is doing is talking back and forth to Uno, and then Uno is talking back and forth to the rig. They're not both trying to talk to the rig at the same time. So at that point, you've got everything in sync, and it was all fairly easy, as I hope you can see. Normally, once you've done this once or twice, you can do this whole thing in less than 5 minutes. It's really not too hard. That is about all I had planned for today. Look at that, it's 11:59. So I'll tell you one thing while you're thinking about it. If there's one good thing to come out of this whole virus thing that's going on worldwide, is that our hobby is ideally suited to being stay at home, quarantining yourself. We can do social distancing of hundreds or thousands of miles, and it's certainly a great opportunity to sit in the shack and generally have a good time, right? let me bring up another slide here real quick. What have I got here? Here we go. So here I am again. By the way, while you guys are thinking of any questions you may have, I would like to dispel a rumor that's going around. Any of you guys follow the Mr. G.O., David Kassler, K-E-0-O-G? He does quite a few nice videos on YouTube. And there's been a malicious rumor flying around that he and I are the same person, but whereas he has an American accent, I have an English accent. Now, this is totally untrue. But it's understandable you would make that mistake because, to be honest, we're both extremely handsome older gentlemen. I'm sure you'll agree. So anyway, here I am doing my fireside chat. Let's see if... yeah, there's my shack for the day. It's interesting because I don't normally work things this way. Most of my computer stuff I do on a Mac in a different room. I have the rig somewhere else, but I wanted to put everything where I could get to it at once. And it was rather difficult. Once you've been running SDR software, you will know that you are going to be wanting to have multiple screens available to fit all the windows on. Mike yesterday showed how to use CSV User List Browser, which is a super piece of software. It's got that great map and everything else. By the time you do that, you show a few VRXs. You need a lot of screen real estate. On top of that, if you're running studio software to try and do a YouTube live, you need to run some extra software to do that too. And the only way I could do it was to come out by the fireplace and set up a laptop. I've actually got a spare TV I put down there to put some other stuff on. And you can't see it, but I've also got my MacBook by my side to try and make sure that the YouTube stream is uninterrupted. So, I hope everyone's staying safe. It looks like the rain has eased off and we were spared being struck by lightning, which is good. And unless I don't see anything else. Oh, I did want to mention one more thing. The slides I showed today, I'm going to publish that slide deck. I'm going to add a few more because we did the setup of Comocom and OmniRig and all that stuff. But we kind of did that live. I'm going to take some screenshots and add that to the slide deck, and then that will be available as a download from SDRplay.com. In addition to that, this particular webinar is being recorded, and as soon as we wrap it up here, it will be available so you can play it back. I hope this has been beneficial. We do encourage any sort of feedback. If it's good, that's great. If I've been crap today, then it's good to know that as well, and we'll try and change what we cover in future broadcasts. Any particular aspects of using an RSP that you'd like covered, we'd be happy to do our best to have a go at it. We try and cycle between myself and Mike and Andy just to give you a bit of variety. It's kind of like, there's a choice. You're going from the extreme, from the sublime to the ridiculous. I admit it, I'm the ridiculous. I'll let you decide which of the other two guys are sublime and who fits in between. I think we should really get John Hudson to do one as well. He just sits in the background and sends me Skype messages and tells me he can't hear me. So, with that in mind, I am going to wrap it up for today. I thank everyone for coming along and listening. Any plans for SDR Uno for other OSs? Yes, Wes. If you go to the SDRplay.com website and do a search for roadmap, it will come up. We very much intend to make SDR Uno multi-platform at some point in the future. It's important to remember that the tools that we use to develop SDR Uno are particularly for Windows. It involves a 100% rewrite to do a multi-platform version, and we're working on that in parallel. We're trying to add more and more features. So it may take a while, but that is the long-term plan. Okay, getting TM2, that's the Teammate 2 as it used to be, an rsync to run at the same time. I don't know why that would be an issue. I haven't used TM2 myself. I know Mike has. Maybe he'll jump in on chat if he's still online with us. There is a separate setting in SDR Uno in the settings window for the teammate, where you select that up, unless there is some sort of COM port conflict. I don't know why that would be an issue. RSP, any idea when the rest of the software suite will be updated for RSPDX? The RSPDX is fully supported in SDR Uno, as you know. I believe Simon has now added support in SDR Console. The DX is already supported in Linux with the new API. So that will work with the DX. I'm not sure. It depends what you're doing in Linux. My attitude is, if you're playing with Linux, you got to be a pretty damn competent programmer yourself anyway, so you probably know better than I am what you're doing. I believe we're going to be putting full support for the DX within the Raspberry Pi image, which of course is Linux by any other name. There are some issues, I think, with SOAPy. Well, actually, I'm not sure that. I'd have to defer to Andy on this one. Some features of the DX will not be available on all software packages, I know. Specifically, if you're using the EXTIO plugin approach, that is incapable of supporting HDR mode on the RSPDX. I don't know if that's specifically what you're talking about there. So I hope that answers the question. And as John pointed out, Steve Andrew, I believe he's down in Australia, who wrote the Spectrum Analyzer software. He's adding RSPDX support to that. The one that bugs me most as a Mac user is the new API does not work very well on Catalina. I actually did get it working for about 5 minutes. There are some quirks on Mac OS that need to be resolved, but we're on the case, and hopefully we'll have that soon. So that's it. Any other questions you have? Paulo from Brazil. All right, how's weather down there? Glad you're enjoying your RSP Duo, and you're more than welcome, and you stay safe down there as well. And I hope everybody stays safe. As John pointed out in the comments, version 1.4 of SDR Uno is coming out real soon. One of the key things about 1.4 is that it has support for plugins. And we're working with a number of third-party software developers such that they will be building plugins that you can then use with SDR Uno and further extend the capabilities of your RSP. So that's going to be really exciting. A lot of work going on, and trust me, we're trying to crank all this stuff out as fast as we can. We're trying to be good both to Windows owners and also to Mac users, and Linux users, and Raspberry Pi users, and anything else we can think of. So with that, I think I'm going to wrap it up for today, and I think we have another schedule coming up next weekend. I think John has agreed we're not going to have this time slot again. I started at 1600, whereas most of the others seem to be at 1700. And I think we're going to go to a standard time of 1700 UTC from now on for any future YouTube or Zoom type webinars, okay? So with that, a big thank you. There's lots of other support on our website. There are the Facebook groups, and there's the what used to be called Yahoo groups, groups.io. And I look forward to seeing you all again soon. 73.